AI Realized, the podcast about everything that is new, now, and next for enterprise executives deploying AI. Hosted by myself, Christina Elwood, and my collaborator, David Yakobovich.
Our guests will share what's driving AI adoption, use cases, and business models for the data and AI economy.
Where the future is bright.
Welcome to AI Realized, the podcast for enterprise executives leading AI deployments. From tackling security, data, and operational challenges to navigating organizational transformation, AI deployment offers a unique opportunity to redesign our organizations from the inside out. I'm Christina Elwood, your host for today's episode, and today we are joined by Christopher Penn, co-founder and chief data strategist at Trust Insights. Christopher's been working in data and AI science and data science long before the current generation of AI, building practical applications in attribution modeling, predictive analytics, and customer journey intelligence. He's also a globally recognized keynote speaker and co-host of the long-running Marketing Over Coffee podcast. What makes his perspective especially valuable is his focus on turning AI into measurable business outcomes, helping organizations connect data to real decisions, real performance, and real ROI. Christopher, welcome to AI Realized.
Thank you for having me.
We're very happy to have you. And this whole area of AI in the vertical functional groups within our organizations like sales and marketing is the sort of topic of the day. So at a very high level, where do you see AI actually working to drive measurable business outcomes in sales and marketing?
The ways that is used best these days, I should take a step back. There's two fundamental ways to use AI, and this incorporates all three branches of it: regressive AI, classification, and generative AI. And those two ways are optimization and innovation. Optimization is do what you've always done, but do it bigger, better, faster, cheaper. And a lot of folks these days are emphasizing faster and cheaper. And then innovation, which is do what you've never done before because you've never had the capabilities. And I'll give a very trivial example. Imagine taking something like an RFP response and turning it into a country music song. Could you do that with AI? Yes. Should you? Yeah, it's debatable. But it is something that you traditionally would never have done before because you just didn't have the capabilities of doing so. When we talk about AI in the enterprise, and in particular in useful ways of using it, one of the most valuable ways is to have it be a synthetic voice of the customer. Back in the summer of 2025, there was an academic paper, and I'm struggling to remember the name of the paper, but it showed in peer-reviewed research that generative AI models accurately replicate purchase intent, buyer intent, with about 90% accuracy. So if you were to, for example, take your existing ideal customer profiles and put them into the generative AI tool of your choice, or even better, an agentic AI tool of your choice, and have them function as a virtual focus group, you basically have a customer on tap 24/7 to ask questions of, hey, I've got 2 subject lines. I've got this, I've got that. I've got a new product idea. I need to raise my prices. Tell me, machine masquerading as my customer, what my customer's probable reactions are going to be to this, and how can I message it in a way that will minimize risk or maximize the revenue opportunity.
That's a fabulous example of using generative AI. Do you have examples for the other two types?
So regression AI is the classic. Goes back to the Eisenhower administration in the 1950s. And one of the most powerful tools here is what's called uplift modeling. And there are statistical methods like Granger causality, et cetera. One of the challenges that marketers face is, imagine you have all of this data. You have your web traffic, and you have your CRM data, and you have your social media data, and this, that, the other thing. And you say, hey, we have this campaign in flight or whatever, something that you did. And you say, I want to know what the impact of that thing was. But at the same time, you've got Google ads running, you've got YouTube ads running, you've got emails going out the door, you've got billboards all around the city. It's very difficult because it's a lot of noise. Good multivariate regression techniques like uplift modeling, propensity score modeling, Granger causality, etc., can be used by you in partnership with your favorite generative AI tool to say, given all of this data, can we build a statistically valid model that shows the uplift of this thing? This is something we get from bioinformatics, right? When you say, I have all this information about this patient and we administered a treatment, what is the effect of the treatment on the patient, especially given how much other noise there is? I first started working with this type of modeling back in 2013 when I was working at a PR firm, because public relations is notoriously difficult to measure because there's not a direct click stream between positive press coverage and something else. And so I was brought into the firm I was working at the time to try and help them build models like this that would help them understand what the true lift of a PR campaign was. So that's regression. And the second one, classification, is one of my favorites because it's all about organizing your data. If you've got a bunch of data that has no structure of things, you can bring structure to that data and then bring insights out of it. For example, things like basic sentiment analysis, topical focus, given a piece of information, a pool of information, what in this information is relevant and what is not. So imagine you have vast quantities of social media data and you want to know which of the stuff is actually about us, particularly if you have a company like our company is named Trust Insights. That's a fairly common phrase. So how do you use these tools to identify things like named entities, then be able to measure your presence within a pool of data?
Is that the work of Trust Insights as an organization?
It is partially. So we are a consulting firm. We focus on, these days, AI implementation and enablement, helping organizations. My CEO and co-founder, Katie Robert, is our organizational change and change management expert. She's the one who comes into an enterprise and says, yeah, you've got the shiny new toys, but toys themselves are not enough. You need to enable the people and your processes to match the platforms. And then she came up with this framework called the 5P framework by Trust Insights, which is purpose, people, process, platform, performance. Why are you even doing the thing? And then how do you measure success as the bookend to your traditional people process technology, which was originally from H.J. Levitt in 1964 was the diamond framework back then, became the people process technology trope. And then Katie extended that to say, having purpose and performance as the bookends for it.
Yeah, well, obviously, the organizational friction is the largest impediment to the adoption of AI. From the time that AI Realized was first formed in October 2024, we heard this from the stage that 100% of the companies were struggling with that friction. It remains the most cited source of friction today. It sounds like that's part of the work that you've been doing. So, what are the underlying measurement and decision systems? What do those look like inside of those organizations, and how do they relate to the friction of adoption?
One of the biggest interesting pieces of feedback we get from people who are resistant is the immediate demand, oh, show me the ROI of AI, which we always say, so how are you measuring the ROI of this task now? And the answer is we're not. Then you can't measure the ROI of AI because you're not measuring it now. You have no basis for comparison. And so that's one of the things that we immediately tend to flag. But you can, everything has to come back to three basic imperatives, right? You're either saving time, saving money, or making money. Everything you do has to in some way have line of sight to one of those three objectives, ideally more than one, in order for you to demonstrate impact. When we work with organizations, the first imperative that they go after is always saving time. How can we free up time? How can we free up resources and stuff like that? And that's a great first place to start because there are a lot of process inefficiencies and there are a lot of capabilities that today's agentic AI systems can do that can take on a task completely. I'll give you an example. This, again, my CEO is a non-technical person. I'm like the button pushing propeller head in the company. But we've been using Claude Cowork a lot, which is a non-technical agentic system. And we measured her output in terms of important deliverables, strategic blueprints, this, that, the other thing for ourselves and for other clients in the 6-month period prior to Claude Cowork coming out. And then in the 3-month period after when she started using it. And her productivity level as a senior executive, as a leader, is literally 100x what it used to be. That is how much more productive she is at doing things like budgeting, forecasting, strategy, strategic counsel, and all the way down to website design, right? Rebuilding slide decks, all of this stuff that there's so much manual drudgery in, like making a slide deck, that if you can use your brain to get the valuable stuff out of your head and then hand off the typing, essentially, to a tool, you can dramatically increase the results you get. And so that's the first enablement that we tend to go after with people, is to say, let's get your to-do list under control personally or organization. If your department has a punch list, we have a framework we call TRIPS: time, repetitiveness, importance, pain, and sufficient data. And we score tasks by that. When we do a department or a company-wide audit with somebody, we'll say, okay, let's score all of your deliverables and tasks by this matrix and identify the top 10 tasks that are just a waste, right? It consumes a lot of time, highly repetitive, tons of examples of success, and nobody likes doing it. Those are the tasks that immediately you should be handing off to AI, because no one gets upset about it, right? There's a lot of conversation about the future of work. Nobody is, zero clients have ever said, zero people have ever said, you know what? I would like to keep doing my expense reports by hand.
This is the first piece of advice I think that people took away when this conversation was started, which is start with something people hate. And that's a wonderful example of that. And I myself have found Claude Cowork to be an extremely valuable boost to my productivity as well. So I resonate with that. But I think the revenue one is the one that needs some attention. And I'm very curious what you're seeing AI actually do to improve attribution, for example, or conversion or qualification, any of the elements of moving a deal through the funnel. Can you illustrate some examples there?
Sure. So a couple of really obvious ones. Number one, what is now called, among other things, GEO. There's so many different variations of, but AI basically making recommendations. 11% of our business in the last 6 months has come from AI recommending us, because we have been working and we've understood the space. We've been working in the space for a while. We've been doing what we know works based on the architecture of the technology and how the technology functions. We've been planning ahead for years for this, and it works. That's 11% of our closed won deals come from generative AI tools recommending us. So we love to be case study zero for a lot of these things. In terms of revenue generation, one of the things these tools enable is better product market fit and new products. So as an example, I typically deliver 20, 30 workshops in the spring and the fall to all kinds of different industries. Now, with tools like Claude Code, I can take my workshop that I did, take all the materials and outputs from it, put it through Claude Code with a recipe that I built, plus a bunch of just some custom Python code. And in about 2.5 hours, it spits out a polished book that then goes immediately into our company bookstore that goes up for sale and typically generates $1,000 to $2,000 of extra revenue. We just published generative AI for destination marketers. That product did not exist. And instead of taking 6 to 9 months to bring it to market, I can have it to market in under 6 hours and immediately begin monetizing it. At a broader level, rationalizing your product portfolio or looking at product market fit, those customer profiles we were talking about earlier. If you have a product and it's not selling, you take your ideal customer profile and you literally say, why are you not buying this? Especially if you have other signal data that you can provide, like your inbox, your call center data, etc., to better understand this is why our customers are not buying this thing. You have macroeconomic data. Why are people booking fewer hotels? Because everything costs more money. Gas is $5 a gallon. People aren't traveling. That's why. And so revenue generation can be improved product market fit. It can be net new products that you didn't have for sale before, especially in ways that you've never done before, information products and things like that. And of course, referrals from these new tools that are, if you have done a good job of being present and having stuff out there for the machines to learn from, become a word of mouth tool, but the word of mouth is being spread by a machine instead of human.
Yeah, so I should say for our listeners that we have done a number of things on GEO recently in the AI Realize community. We have a webinar that you can find on the YouTube channel. We've got 3 articles on GEO, and we just did a roundtable and published a readout from the roundtable discussion. So this area of GEO for marketers and for founders and for CEOs is really important, and it plays back into something you said earlier, which was the importance of PR. Can you walk us through a specific example where AI changed a business outcome in sales or marketing, not just the analysis, but the decision and the result?
In terms of an outcome, this is going to be a tricky one to thread the needle very carefully. We had a pharmaceutical client, and they wanted to know, they're a very large company. They wanted to know what their largest competitor was doing. So what we did was we took 1,900 of the competitors' open job listings, downloaded them, digested them with a language model, and then essentially did a large scale inference model to say what is this company's 12 to 18 month strategic priority? Because you don't hire people for things that are unimportant, right? You don't add headcount for stuff that's not relevant. You add headcount for stuff that is strategically important. And what we found was that there were 3 different product lines, but one in particular that this competitor was hiring like crazy for. We handed that to our client. Our client said, we don't have a good business answer to this competitive challenge. And they spun one up, and essentially now we don't know what happened to their version of that product line because we were not privy to those conversations. But the people who were our stakeholders were like, this is probably the most important thing that we've ever done with AI, because we can now anticipate what a competitor is doing in the 12 to 18 month strategic horizon based on the hiring data.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I have interviewed a founder of a company that does outside-in analysis using AI, and their a wedge business case is with B2B sellers, and they are able to bring them opportunities that were identified using outside analysis of the target accounts for their KPIs, the gaps in their performance, and deliver those opportunities with a built-in business case for why the company should be buying. Now, that's especially powerful when you're looking at complex product portfolios. So if you've got 50, 100, 200 products that you're trying to sell into enterprises that are large and complex, you simply cannot do that mapping with human beings. And AI is ideally suited to doing that. And they're creating hundreds of millions of dollars worth of new pipeline, which are essentially SQLs on a silver platter for an enterprise seller. Now, that's just not something that could have been done without having not just the AI, but the system sitting on top of it. So the business logic layer that sits on top of it that does all of the triangulation and root cause analysis. Now, that's something I'm hearing you say too. When you say, especially with agents, I think that's what you're referring to, is that the agent systems are where the logic is living in addition to the automation that allows for some of these decisions to be taken. Can you double click on that?
So I've got one running right now, an system called Hermes Agent that is going out and it is identifying every trade association that's having an event within 2 hours of my house within the next 12 to 18 months at all the different venues and stuff like that. So it's going out, it's browsing the web, it's grabbing all the data, it's assembling the data, it's identifying the contacts for those people, either by email address or LinkedIn profile, and then it provides me a rank ordered list of here's the associations that I should pitch as a keynote speaker to speak at their events. I am doing none of this. I gave it a 13-page project plan to start, and then I'm hands off after that. It does everything else downstream of that. And that is what today's agentic systems are capable of. We have what we call the 5 levels of AI enablement. And it maps to product market fit. Done by you, done with you, done for you, done without you, done in advance of you. So done by you is level 1, chat GPT. You're the copy paste monkey. You're typing all the time. You're copy pasting, and you get some gains, but not much, because you, the human, are essentially the machine operator. Level 2 are things like gems and GPTs, standard operating procedures that you've baked into little mini apps in these tools that increase efficiency, but you, the human, is still copy pasting an awful lot. Level 3 is where you go from individual contributor to manager of an agent, almost like a virtual employee. These are systems like Claude Code, Claude Cowork, etc., where you are now managing, you are delegating tasks. Level 4 is systems like Hermes, OpenClaw, Deerflow, you name it, that all these different autonomous agents. You give them a project plan, maybe even a job description, and they go off and do the job. And then level 5 is not just an autonomous person, but an autonomous agency or company where a system like Paperclip, for example, or any kind of control plane similar, you are delegating the project to this virtual agency that just does all of those tasks that you need to bring something to market. I've got another tool running right now. I don't know how it's going to turn out. It could go well, it could go horribly wrong, but it's tied into an investment app, and I've given it the charter. I'm going to give you $25. You have to using these APIs and these platforms, you have to turn this into $100. You can issue trades, you can choose which assets to buy, etc. But you figure it out and grab all the data you need to do back testing, select which algorithms, select which statistical causal algorithms make the most sense, and then run a live test and see if it can turn $25 into 100.
Okay, that's ambitious on your part doing that. I applaud your creativity there. So where should people think about, or listeners think about doubling down right now to get more value? It's actually compounding and working for people right now.
So go back to the 5P framework by Trust Insights, which is purpose. Why are you doing the thing? Forget AI. What are the 5 biggest things that have got your hair on fire right now? Take those 5 things and decompose them into their individual tasks. And then what of these tasks follow the TRIPS framework that you can clearly identify? This is a task that a machine should be doing. No human should be doing this particular task. It doesn't have to be the whole job, but that problem is composed of tasks. Decompose that and then map the people, the process, and then the platform to those tasks. And then for each task, identify a measurable, quantifiable, objective outcome that a machine can tune against and come up with answers that will deliver value. That's how you get value out of AI, is by putting it in its place in the larger strategic structure, and then saying, how can we decompose this problem to the individual pieces, and then which of those pieces can we hand off to a machine, and where are we still going to have humans as blockers? A lot of people, and this is something my CEO, Katie Robert, talks about all the time, is a lot of people start with the technology. Oh, we've got to use AI for this. We've got to use AI for this. No, you've got to figure out what is the problem and how do you measure the solution to the problem in clear, objective, quantifiable ways. It's the old management trope. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. That has never been more true than with AI. For example, very simple example, let's say you're doing some creative writing or just doing any kind of writing, and you have a writing style guide. There is a measure of text authorship similarity called Burroughs delta that a machine can analyze a piece of text and understand. You can run this mathematical comparison. If you say to a machine, I want you to write like me, you will use Burroughs delta with the value cannot exceed 1.25. Now a language model like a Claude Code can iterate and iterate until it hits that success number, because it knows what success looks like. So many people don't get value out of AI because they do not know what success looks like. They cannot quantify it. And as a result, the machine can't quantify it, and the machine has no idea whether it has succeeded or not.
How do you recommend people factor in the safety element? Because you're right, they can't do if you can't tell what the outcome is, it can't achieve the goal. How do you do that and make it safe at the same time?
What do you mean by safety? Define safety specifically.
So agents can go rogue, for example. You can have data exfiltrated. You can have them be a portal in for a hacker. There's different ways in which the agentic system falls outside of our security systems today. And there's been quite a bit written about that, both in our Substack newsletter as well as in the wild by various security experts. Given that you are using agents in autonomous fashion, that is the higher risk profile for an agent, is when they are autonomous rather than having a human in the loop. How are you factoring in safety, and what is your advice to others as they consider building autonomous agents?
Go back to the way you've always done it. How do you handle an untrusted contractor? You don't sit them in the middle of the office on the executive floor with root level passwords to everything, right? That would be a disaster. You say, no consultants, you're going to sit here in this little locked room with this laptop that's been air gapped from our network, and you do your work in this little concrete room. It's like what all the three-letter agencies do. They have a little concrete room in the basement of Langley where those untrusted entities get to work. So in my agentic setup, for example, I have a little B-Link box. It's its own little computer. It is firewalled outside my main setup, so it can't even cross into my main. It's basically just on its own little island, and I can terminal into it and things like that. But on that box, there's no sensitive data. There's no way for it to be able to use credentials it doesn't have access to. There is no way. So even if it runs across hostile code and it gets prompt overridden by some hostile code, it's in a DMZ. It's the same thing we've been doing for 30 years with Wi-Fi. We have DMZs in our Wi-Fi networks to keep the main network safe from guests. This is not new. It's just people forget how we've done security and safety in other places.
Like, to be fair, many executives have never had to stand up their own system. You have business people who are creating these agents and so forth, and it's the first time they've ever built a product, if you will, and they haven't had to think that through. Let's do a little thought experiment. So for the things that you run on your laptop, which is connected to the internet, is connected to systems of record, and is your main terminal, when do you decide, oh, this needs to go over here on my DMZ isolated, air-gapped, super duper secure computer over here? What's an example of an app you would do in one versus the other?
Anytime that I'm using any system where there's an option that built in, so Claude, for example, calls it dangerously skip permissions, right? And if you want a task to run autonomously, you use dangerously skip permissions. That is the mental red flag to say this does not belong on the production system. The moment you have to say, I want this to be less hands-on. I want to run this in auto mode. I want to run it in YOLO mode. That's when you know it goes to the other machine. When you, the human, are constantly hitting, do you approve this? Do you approve this? And you actually read what it's asking you to do. That's when you can have a greater degree of safety to know, okay, this is asking me permissions. Or better yet, if you know what you're looking at in a tool, you can say, okay, you're asking me for permission to this command. No, you may not do that. Hey, can I remove all these files? No, you may not. Another thing that really helps is having strict guardrails and permissions within the apps themselves. Now, yes, they can be hijacked in the worst case scenarios, but most bad things happen because people provide insufficient guardrails. A simple example, in Claude Code, you have a list of permissions that you can give it out of the box. One of them should be, you are forbidden to delete files. You may not use this command ever. If you don't think of something relevant, move it to the archived folder so that I can move it back if you're wrong. So it's defining what those rules are, your first principles. Every project should have first principles. Some are going to be universal, like you should use existing software that's known and proven to work rather than reinvent the wheel every single time you approach a task. Other things are those you say, like, you can only operate in this folder, and depending on the system you're on, like I said, you may need to move it to a separate box so that even if it does decide to override its own permissions, it can't leave its little containment box. All of this is stuff that should be a part of your AI council and your AI governance, that these rules and things should be decided up front.
So let's talk about applying this in the world of sales and marketing, since that's the area that you are an expert in. Is there any specific advice for the sales and marketing executive and team that is adopting AI either agentically for task automation or autonomous automation? Is there anything specific that you would recommend to them?
My number one recommendation is work with your tech team, obviously, but hook into your CRM, using the data that you have and your sales playbook. If you don't have a sales playbook written down, you should. Once you have that, you could have, and you should have, either an agentic system or who cares what the fancy label is, that looks at every deal in your CRM against your sales playbook and says, what is the next best action that we need to take on this deal to get it to move forward? Because your sales playbook should have your main sales tactics, your methodology. Do you use solution selling? Do you use insight selling? Do you use challenger? Whatever the methodology is that you use at your shop should be embedded in there. You should have battle cards in there. You should have objection handling in there so that you can extract all the data from your CRM, maybe from your call center system, particularly if you use something like Gong, put it into a language model programmatically through a tool like a Claude Code or whatever, and build and then augment back into your CRM. This is the next best action for this deal. If you want this deal to move forward based on our sales playbook, this is what you should do. And you can do this. We built this for a couple of clients now. Not only does that help advance sales more quickly, but then you can take things like call transcripts, map them back against the sales playbook and say, these are our sales reps who are out of compliance with the sales playbook. We use challenger methodology, and the rep here is not doing a good enough job of step 3 framing. On all their calls, they fall down at step 3 framing. They need coaching most there, because the tools can identify in a call transcript where a person is skilled and where a person falls short. And then you can coach that person to say, okay, you need to work on this, and then build them an interactive tool, again, with the language models of your choice and ideal customer profile, to help them train, to help them have that simulated conversation where the simulated prospect comes back with an objection. Oh, I don't want to sign a 12-month contract. Okay, what have you learned from your training that will help you overcome that objection?
Gotcha. So if our listeners could take one thing away from our conversation today, what would you want them to take away?
At every level in the use of generative AI, if you give it one sentence, everything will get better immediately. And that one magic sentence is, ask me questions until you have enough information to succeed at the task. Ask me questions until you have enough information to succeed at the task. Whether it is Claude Code, whether it's an agent, whether it's ChatGPT Basic Edition, everyone forgets that these AI tools do not generally have enough information, and so they infer and guess a lot. And when you are using these tools, whether using it for management, for sales, for marketing, for whatever, you are forgetting that it does not know. Even if you're providing it with some data or you've got to connect it to your internal systems, it still doesn't know everything that you think it knows. And if you add that one sentence, especially when you're starting out on a project of any kind, you will immediately get 5x better results, because the model will stop and say, I have some questions like, who's this for? Or how have you tried to solve this problem already? And at every level, every grade of experience, I use this all the time. And I consider myself to be a fairly proficient user of these tools. I use this all the time. And I am constantly surprised by how the machine challenges me to think deeper and to provide information. And more often than not, I'm going, ugh, why didn't I think to include that? And now I do.
I have that experience myself. I appreciate that. So what resources would you recommend for listeners who want to learn more about your work and about adopting AI for their sales and marketing organizations?
The best place to start is trustinsights.ai. And then you can get to our blog, our podcast, our YouTube channel, our live stream, our Instagram, all these places. There's so many, but the starting point is trustinsights.ai, and you can find everything from there.
All right, great. In the AI revolution, you've been around the track a few times. You've been a leader in a number of different contexts. In this AI era, what's the leadership skill that you find most valuable right now?
Project management. Project management, being good at designing complex projects, because if you're really good at that, like my CEO Katie is, you can anticipate all the things that are likely to go wrong. And when you're working particularly with agentic systems, if you can anticipate what's going to go wrong and get ahead of it, you will get 10x better results than the person who's just next to you winging it and hoping that they can chat their way through it. As models get smarter, this is something Ethan Mollick of Wharton says all the time, which I love. As AI gets smarter, it makes smarter mistakes that are harder to detect. So you have to stop being its chat buddy and start thinking like a project manager and say, this is the task. Using the 5P framework by Trust Insights, what is the purpose? What does success look like? Who are the people involved? How do we do this? What tools and technologies should we use? If you have those skills, you are well positioned to get heads and shoulders better results out of AI than somebody who doesn't.
Christopher Penn, co-founder and chief data scientist at Trust Insights, thank you so much for sharing your experience and your advice today with the AI Realized audience. We really appreciate you being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Why the future is bright.